students, some of which are boarding. We chose this school because actually from a structural standpoint and infrastructure, it's one of the best and better schools within the region. So it is actually much richer. It is a public school, but also gets private help from parents. So this is one of the buildings. There's 18 classrooms, some more buildings, and they have even a map of what existed. It's almost like a mini campus in the wilderness is sort of what you would think of. So now we're going to turn this over and we're going to talk at the guest.
First of all, good morning, and I just want to say thank you for allowing us this opportunity. This was an incredible experience. Like Lisa said just a few minutes ago when she was hosting someone as part of a German exchange, we were able to build relationships with people. We walked away with friends, and we're so incredibly grateful to have had this opportunity.
Yeah, I want to second that. I've done a lot of traveling myself, but I've never had anything quite like this opportunity. I go to a lot of national parks, see a lot of wildlife, and this trip was that times 1,000, but it was the cultural experience, being in the school, which was, for me, life-changing. Again, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced before, so thank you very much for everything you've done to allow for this to happen.
So to start, we just wanted to kind of explain a little bit where we come from as Emmaus high school teachers, but also what the experience was at Mfuwe Day. So this is just a visual of one of the science laboratories, and Mike's going to speak about that a little bit more in a few minutes. We're just going to take you through a couple of things we observed while we were there and compare the differences to what we're used to as American teachers. So one of the first things we learned when we got there was that the school has a very strict policy on cell phones. And immediately to Mike and myself, this made a lot of sense. The teachers that visited our school were so concerned about student cell phone use and electronic devices, and we all of a sudden understood that they had very strict policies, monetary fines actually. And a student that had a phone in school would have to pay 500 kwacha, which is about 50 American dollars. So that was one of the first things we learned. We also observed, too, that all of the students in Mfuwe Primary or Mfuwe Day Secondary were required to wear uniforms. The students had to wear leather shoes, or they were supposed to wear leather shoes, and they were required to pay for these uniforms themselves. This is just a visual of a typical classroom, very different than the classrooms that I am used to as a teacher. While we were there, we learned that the students actually physically stay in the room. So for example, in their 12th grade class, there were 4 different sections, A, B, C, and D. Those students, 60 to 80 students per classroom, they stayed in the physical space and the teachers rotated for the class periods. So this is what a classroom looked like. This one is cleaned up. There were students that would come through with brooms, but not the brooms that you're thinking of with a wooden handle, brooms where they would bend over and sweep the floor, and that's how they would keep the rooms clean. While we were there, as Cindy said, students were taking state standardized tests, Zambian examinations, and the grades that were not required to take those examinations were taking mock examinations or practice exams. We learned while we were there that their entire academic grade was based off of this one test that they took. So for us, we kind of stepped back and said, what about all the other work the students do? And so we learned that yes, students have homework, and yes, students are required to turn in assignments, but the teachers assess those or grade those just to see student understanding. It's the final test that matters. This is the faculty lounge. This was really interesting. One of the big observations I noticed as a high school teacher was the students could freely come and go from the campus. Not like Emmaus High School where you have to have a pass if you want to go to the water fountain or if you need to go to your locker. Students could freely walk around the campus. And teachers, their faculty lounge was outside in the shade, which I thought was so nice because you could get some vitamin D during the day instead of the fluorescent lights that I'm so used to. Another view of the faculty lounge. Judy Chinyemba is right here. You'll remember Judy, she visited us. And this is Mr. Jim Daka, science teacher, guidance counselor, head teacher. He does a lot. And then Mike, of course, in the teacher's faculty lounge. Report cards. This was very interesting. We had a day where we sat down with the guidance department and they took us through the grading at Mfuwe. So for us, this was very difficult to process at some points. They do have percentages like we do. 100 to a 75% gets you a top grade of a 1, and then the grading scale works down from there. So for me, I was sitting there thinking, well, what's an A? There is no A, it's a 1 through 9. And so passing marks, depending on the course, passing marks could be anything, from a 6 up in some cases. And we were able to look at a student report card, and I'm not sure how well this picture is visible, but all of their grades have to be handwritten on the report card.
They couldn't have found you a better report card? That's all nice.
I know.
I think that you think they'd have given you the one with the valedictorian.
What's interesting when we were in this meeting was we learned that grades at this school, even though it is a better school, there are many students who struggle academically. And so this was just an example of a report card they have. You can see the official stamp from the Republic of Zambia, Ministry of General Education, and Cindy had an opportunity to meet one of the individuals from the Ministry of Education. But this was their sample report card. One of the things the school really wants to do is improve their overall educational program. So the resources that your organization has provided to them is going to afford them that opportunity to improve their technique and help their students achieve when it comes to these examinations. The guidance department at Mfuwe does things similar to Emmaus High School's guidance department. They deal with social guidance issues. They also deal with academic planning. There were a few of them. They're all full-time academic teachers, so they don't have a dedicated guidance department to offer support. There are teachers who are teaching English, teaching religious studies. Mr. Jim Daka, a few slides ago, he's the head science teacher. He's also the head of the guidance department. So we have people working in multiple professional positions doing the best that they can, but they lack time. They also lacked efficient resources. The record keeping is done by hand, so they have pages and pages of information. There were a few printers on campus, but again, it was not very efficient. They have a lot of social concerns. They focus a lot on getting kids to attend school, so absenteeism is something that they work on, and also early pregnancy. And one of the things that really struck me was that they give their students pregnancy tests. And to me as an American, I kind of stepped back and said, whoa. But there was this cultural difference, and there was also a different expectation there, and kind of learning how that was perceived as opposed to the United States. So the guidance department does a lot.
When I first talked to Jim Daka about the way that they do science, and even Tim Tembo who came here, the one thing that it initially struck me, and we were worlds apart, was the way in which they set their curriculum up. So you saw the report card, you now know that it's one test and that determines their grade. So we've heard here in America about teaching to the test. I mean, this is that to a degree that we can't even understand. They have one test that they have to perform well on to get a good grade. Now think about how that's going to drive the curriculum. So the country of Zambia, they're telling the teachers, you better make sure that you align everything you do to this one test. So the science teachers would plan something, and I would ask them, why are you doing this? And they would sometimes struggle to come up with an answer on why they're doing something. And even the students, if you remember, when they had the first opportunity to talk to us, they asked us questions that were more about, for me, it was about topographic maps and definitions instead of American culture, which is really weird. It was almost like they were quizzing me on whether I knew the exact definition of a term. And the reason for that is because they need to know that exact definition. They had questions on their exams that were literally fill in the blank. Not about deeper understanding, transferring what they're learning to something else. It's really technical black and white stuff that they had to basically memorize. So it's a difficult situation for the students, but it's also tough for the teachers. So I started working with them a little bit on just the way that they set up their curriculum and the way they set up lessons. And this is a chemistry lab, and this is what we have on the top of professional development. And what they did there, which is really neat, is we were there for about, I think it was like an hour and a half session where Jim Daka, he ran 3 different smaller lab stations, and all of the science teachers took part in that. And we were doing the labs, and we were able to give him feedback at the end. And there have been a couple times so far this market period at Emmaus where I've actually cited things that happened at Mfuwe. It's like, well, look what they do here. And we don't even do this stuff at Emmaus. I've never had the opportunity to do a lab with other teachers in the room and for them to give me feedback, and I've never been able to do that either. And it's such a practical way of growing professionally. So There are some concerns with, you know, the way that they set the lab up, but he got to hear that. The teacher got to hear the feedback, and the supplies were minimal. It wasn't the cleanest way of doing it, the most responsible way of doing it. They're also very resourceful. We built a little greenhouse. Is that?
That's in there.
The next slide? I'm not sure if it is. Go ahead, yeah. No, it's not. But they.
You have to look at what that says.
Is that silver nitrate?
Lead nitrate.
Lead nitrate. Yeah, the stuff was mixed. It just wasn't the way that we would handle it in America.
No gloves.
Right. There's the instructions were kind of sloppy, and the other teachers told him that at the end. But it was pretty much par for the course down there. I think so. But I love the idea of this, of allowing other teachers to collaborate and perform the lab. So that was pretty cool. This is the little greenhouse. So we were doing a lesson on climate change, and we wanted to build a little greenhouse, which they didn't really understand what a greenhouse was, and it occurred to me, of course, you don't need to. It's basically growing season all the time down here. So Jim wanted to put together a little greenhouse, so he had the kids go over to his house, which was maybe 100 yards away from the school, and they came back with some chicken wire, and then they found plastic somewhere, and we built a little greenhouse. So again, very resourceful, more resourceful than we are here. And another thing, they trust the kids more than we trust the kids here. They let the kids go over to the teacher's house. That was just an interesting observation. When we built the greenhouse, I asked the biology teacher, do you know what this is? And she didn't know what it was. And we were talking about the greenhouse effect, and she's like, oh, you mean like, what's happening to Mother Earth right now? Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. So sometimes they don't transfer the knowledge from a textbook to what's really going on. You need to encourage them a little bit, but that's what was going on here. Do you want to talk about your experience?
This is science.
Yeah, well, go ahead. Yeah, it's you.
So I am not a science teacher, okay? But we got to participate in science professional development. And thank goodness for Tim. We were, at this point, I was Mr. Jim Daca's student who had no idea what was going on. So I was there working with a teacher, working through a lab, playing with chemicals in a science laboratory with no gloves. And this was a really interesting experience for me because I could see the teaching technique, but I could also see and experience what a student who might not understand would be going through and ask those questions to help guide the professional development. So this was a pretty awesome experience as a teacher. One of the most important classes that they offered in Mfuwe, in my opinion, was their practical studies course. We would call this family consumer science or home economics. This particular group was fantastic. They fed us lunch every day. It's a course that not all students have the opportunity to take. It costs additional money, so you pay extra tuition because you're preparing food or you're making handcrafts that are then going to be sold somewhere else. So this was fantastic. On this particular day that we visited them, they were actually making a wedding cake for a wedding that would be happening in the community. So that was a really awesome experience. This is just another visual. They had 3 oven ranges in their home economics room, so they did not have a lot of resources available. They were able to get all their groceries from local markets and roadside markets as well. They had a small area where they collected plastic bags and other things that as an American I might throw away. Well, they were taking those resources and they were turning them into handbags or turning them into other things that could be sold or given away to raise money. So I thought that was a pretty interesting experience. This is Mr. Chivali Banda. He was a student teacher in the practical studies course, and one of the things that he did for us every day was he brought us lunch. At Mfuwe Day, they were kind enough to feed us every single lunch day. Our lunches consisted of some type of protein, chicken, beef, one day it was fish, and always shima, and they were nice enough to give us soda also, which was very nice.
Tell what she meant.
Shima, we have a photograph of it, I think, in a couple of slides. Shima is a cornmeal, it's like a thick cornmeal, it reminded me of polenta, but it looks like mashed potatoes. They use it kind of like a bread. You take the shima, you roll it into a ball, and then you dip it into your sauce or into your vegetables, or you can use it to pick up your protein. Mfuwe Lodge is where we were able to stay. This was very important, the connection they had to the actual school, because Mfuwe Lodge actually donates money Guests that stay there, a portion of the money that they pay to stay there goes to help Mfuwe Day School, and also guests can choose to donate additional money to help the school. They fund a lunch program, and also they've helped to build the boarding facilities, the dormitories on the campus. This is an example of a student dormitory. We got to tour one of these dormitories. It was a cement building with not rooms the way you would think of rooms with drywall. These were just partitions, and there were 4 people per room, an area to store their belongings. These outdoor sinks did not have running water. Students had to go to a well or to the school spigot to get water. There were no toilet facilities and no shower facilities the way that we would think dormitories should have those facilities. This is the school lunch program. This is what Shima looks like. And this is the school lunch program. This is the chef making the Shima for the school students that can afford it as part of their tuition. And this side of the building provides the lunches for students who cannot afford to have lunch paid for. They get it donated by the Bush Camp Company from Mfuwe Lodge. Water. Yeah. At Emmaus High School, we're spoiled. We have some of these water coolers throughout the building. At Mfuwe Day, this was the spout spigot that was on campus. This is where people got water. So every time the practical studies department made us lunch, and we were so incredibly grateful, we would see them then going and getting buckets of water, taking it back to their building, and hand washing every single dish, fork, whatever we used that day. And so this is where they got their water. This is where Tim washed his hands after we did our science laboratory, because the science labs didn't have running water. So this was very important to the school. As for the teachers, we made a lot of new friends and fostered some professional relationships. This is Mr. Jim Daka, as we've said, head science teacher, head guidance counselor. His wife, Catherine, is the head of the social sciences department, and she's also a biology teacher. Teachers do many different things, and they did not plan to wear this outfit on the same day. Or at least that's what they told us. But again, they were fantastic, and we kept in contact through social media and email.
A couple other things that I just wanted to follow up on. The Shima, there's one really interesting thing about that. So they would take it and they would do this. And I was always wondering, why are you doing that? And it was to cool it down. And I've never thought about cooling something down with your hands, because I'm thinking, well, wouldn't it be hot on your hands? But they lost sensitivity in their hands a long time ago, because Lori was saying that they would have to hold the pot, like if they're boiling water or something or heating something up, they would have to hold the pot over the fire bare hands. So they didn't really feel that anymore. So they were cooling it down by doing this in their hand. Just an interesting, another interesting difference.
And I don't care if I ever have Shima again in my life.
And then one other thing with that previous picture with Jim and Catherine. Catherine does social science there. If I were in Africa, I would be more of a social science teacher teaching earth sciences. So she teaches meteorology, and that's what I teach here. But in America, that would be considered a science class. The sports equipment, just this whole topic was really interesting. The camera, I had it out all the time, and there were a couple moments where the camera, I just couldn't even take a picture of what I was seeing, and that's the stuff that I remember the most. And this day was really interesting. So we saw a couple different soccer game matches. One of them was pictured on the left, and you can see these are, there is a league like this in Lehigh Valley, Blue Mountain League, Tri-County, where there's adults playing, very competitive. And the guys on the left, they are after high school, they've moved on. And some of them are playing barefoot on the soccer fields, and there are thorns out there, so that was pretty shocking to see. The one thing I'll never forget is watching one player. He was wearing, he had 2 cleats on and 1 sock. They sub him out. He comes off the field. He takes off his 2 cleats and his 1 sock, and a guy who hadn't been playing barefoot comes running over and he puts them on. And that was, I'll just never forget watching that, and just how lucky we are here, where we have an abundance of a lot of equipment. And they really could use some help with that. Off to the right, you're seeing some of the most resourceful things that I saw in Zambia, and that was the middle picture. Tim Tempo is holding a ball. It is a soccer ball made out of plastic bags. When you drive through the town, it smells like burning plastic, and I'm not saying it was all for this, but that's how they get rid of stuff. They took the plastic bags and they would burn them, melt them, and then they would be able to shape it into a ball. And I saw this and I was amazed. I threw it on the ground and it bounced up just like a soccer ball. You could throw it back and forth, and it was genius. And on the right, there's Stan. He had a soccer ball that was made out of a mosquito net. So that's what the little kids were playing with. The adults are playing with, if they're lucky, a good soccer ball, but the kids don't have that yet. This is what a soccer tryout looks like at Mfue Day. There are some coaches there, and the coaches are, it's tough for them. It's an added responsibility, and that's another thing that we found, that the teachers aren't really quick to sign up for extra responsibilities. If you tell them what you're good at, they're going to give you more and more and more to do, and I don't think you're going to get paid for it. So we met some people that knew a lot about soccer, but they weren't soccer coaches. But here you see a bunch of kids barefoot just hitting the ball back and forth, and that's what a tryout looks like. You want to talk about netball?
Yeah, netball.
Yeah. Okay.
So one of the sports we got to play in Mfue was netball. Netball's kind of like basketball, but not. There's no dribbling, but the game is broken into 3 different zones, and players are forced to stay within that space. And once you have the ball, you can't move. You have to then pass it to the next person. We played netball, boys against the girls. Mike played the defender of the net for the girls team, and I played the defender of the net for the boys team. This was incredible to see how well coordinated it was, and also to watch the students play. We had students playing in flip-flops, students playing barefoot, and there was some incredible athletic talent out there. Not me, but everyone else. It was pretty awesome.
Who won the game? Girls.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't.
I was just proud of myself that I was able to block the ball once. That was really the highlight of netball for me. Also too, the students were incredible. This girl, for example, down here, her name was Precious. I was talking to her for a little bit since she was trying to score on my team. She was an incredible athlete. She would be a great, as Mike had said to me, she'd be a great American basketball player, but she has no interest in basketball. And she played in part of her school uniform and a pair of flip-flops, and she was very fast in those flip-flops. A couple of the other students really exhibited great athleticism, and Judy Chinyemba and Tim Tembo, you see them in their Emmaus shirts, they also joined us on the field. That was really unique for us as teachers, because in the United States, we're not allowed to compete in an athletic activity with students, because what if someone gets hurt? And here, there was no concern, no fear, let's go play. And that was a really interesting experience.
One other thing about that, I asked the teachers, well, how do you feel playing against the students? Because in America, if I'm playing volleyball against some kids, I know there's going to be someone on the other side who's probably going to gear up and try and spike one at me, and it's a very respectful game that goes on. And they did that, where after school, the teachers and the students would play volleyball or soccer together. It was a school system that was afraid of, or that was not afraid of the legal system, like we are here. This is us after, I think we're in here, or this is after the soccer game. We did see, like I was mentioning before, when we were watching the guys play barefoot, we did give them some soccer balls. I brought down 4, which was not nearly enough, but I gave this organization, like you see Charles Zulu, you remember him, he came up, and I gave that team 2 balls, I think, and then I gave the school and Tim Tembo another 2. So it's something that we could look into doing more of in the future, because they really, really value and appreciate anything that they can use for soccer, since it's such a big deal to them.
We got to see Tim Tembo's soccer team. They're called the Slam. We were able to see them play a game, though I missed the entire game. While I was there, I wanted to learn more about Nanja, which is a local language spoken in Zambia. And so our driver, Gloria Mulele, whenever the phone rang, she would always say, Wanja. And I wanted to understand, what does that mean? So this was the day I started to learn a little bit of Nanja. Wuli Wanja, Nili Bueno. And this student right here, she was in the highest grade at their primary school. Her name was Anastasia. She sat next to me while I had a piece of paper, and she had me write down words in English and the word in Nanja. So Nyamala Tiki is giraffe, and Jobu is elephant. So this was an awesome experience for me. I told her I'd be back on Saturday for a soccer game. She said she was going to quiz me. So I seriously was studying. Mike was laughing at me because I was studying.
No lie.
I got to learn these words. We didn't get to go to the soccer game because it was canceled. We didn't find out it was canceled until we had been waiting around for a ride for half of an hour. So Africa time, as Cindy said. But I did study, so I felt at least I felt good about
You just
that.
have to picture this, because across the street is a soccer field, and Mike's over there playing. The little girl, Jim, is Tim Tembo's daughter. I became the grandmother. She's following me everywhere. But within like 2 minutes, we just Melissa and I sat down, because like, we're not gonna go stand on some hot soccer field. And these kids showed up and surrounded Melissa, and she was studying. We were trying to like relax, and she was studying.
That's also what it looks like to learn a bunch of curse words. And the Americans don't even know that it's happening. That's what I was thinking all along. Because that's what our kids would probably do something like that. This is humorous. So every day when we go to the principal's office to start the day, we would sit. The first couple of days was awkward, and then it just started getting fun. We'd sit there and we'd wait to find out what was going to happen. We were deviating from the itinerary, and the man to the right, what's his name? Edgar Lungo, he's the president of Zambia, and his picture is everywhere. This is above the principal's desk, so we made a lot of eye contact with that picture throughout our experience. He's in restaurants, and he's now in my classroom, thanks to Melissa. But our daily ritual, we'd start off in the principal's office, and we would hopefully go do something, and then at 10 o'clock, they stuck to this. They had their tea break, so we'd go back to the principal's office, and they would make the rolls, and we'd have tea, and we would do that for, it seemed like an hour, and then we would go off and do something else.
We had shipped and we got a donation from a company called Ward Scientific, which East Penn School District had gave contact to. We had a little trouble with customs, etc. But we finally took a bus, went to the airport, to the FedEx office, which was behind a gift shop, which nobody knew where it was. And we got them a lot of anatomy equipment, etc. And we wanted to make sure and take inventory. So we're putting together the equipment. We also, thanks Don Bloss, we got some Emfue Rotary t-shirts made. And we had a day where we said, let's do a Rotary Day. So we wore our t-shirts. The next thing you know, all these people, where'd you get that t-shirt? I want one of those t-shirts. I'm like, well, do you know about Rotary? And I just want to read you something that just happened at 10 minutes to 5 this morning. This is from Eunice, who was the president of their Rotary Club when we first started the project 2 years ago. Has been so long, I hope you're fine. We are all fine, and more members have come to join our Rotary Club. They initially had 4, now they have more. The district governor had come to visit, who hadn't been there for 2 years, and inducted some more members to the club. We even had some training as a district trainer came to our club. More people have now decided to be part of the Rotary family, and I see Emfue Rotary moving forward. So that's pretty exciting because what we do as a project can really help. But anyway, it wasn't the normal meeting. It was pretty different, I must say. We sat around a lot and stared, but we got through that.
Towards the, this might have been the last day when we were at the school actually that was pretty typical. On our last day, after our professional development, we got a nice tour of the area, and Charles took us around, and we got to see a lot of different places in the village. We saw an elementary school offsite, and we also went down to see some of the different agriculture areas that they have. Got to learn a little bit more about some farming, and then we got to see some other health clinics as well.
Okay, just because we're going to be closing up, the one thing that we truly learned was the manual systems that they have are so cumbersome. And with 80 students to a class, if you're a kid in the back of the class and they're writing, they rewrite and repeat on the chalkboards, that you're going to lose. So we did, at the end, Mike and Melissa did an outstanding job, and we had some teacher development days. And one of the things we did, this is the assistant headmaster, is going over how they can integrate, because we started out with 4 projectors and screens, etc. for the classrooms, how they can inject technology into taking their manual lesson plans and teaching on a screen. So a lot of teachers came, very interested, lots of questions. This is Mike talking. The other thing that we did is their techniques are so strict and old-fashioned that they have no way to engage students. So Melissa put together an understanding to help them with easy techniques
to be able to move them forward. And there's Mike doing some same examples. We then had a session in how to use the projectors and screens step by step. One of the things with Rotary is sustainability, and through the head teacher and assistant teacher, we wanted security. We wanted to make sure they didn't break. Before they were opened up, I insisted we see the policy. They in fact do have a policy. And now what has happened is, as the result of this, I think I might have said a couple weeks ago, Tim Tempo has told us there are now lines of requests for teachers to use the computers. Kids are coming to class early because they can now see from the back of the class, and they're staying late. So in a short period of time, that impact. The goal will be to take testing scores before and now testing scores after. We gave the teachers kind of an assignment to take one lesson at a time. They physically don't have the time. If you would see the manual books they have to keep track of this, to take one class at a time and go forward. This is their computer lab, of which is a separate room, and they have 20 computers, but only half of them really work, and one is used as a server, and they're very old. Okay, next steps, and just real quick. Several things. We don't feel that we really completed the project, because in 2 weeks it's very difficult. We didn't want to give them any more equipment, because based on particularly our experience in Africa, we want to make sure that they can do something and do something with it. They've now proven, and we'll have to do the final report to Rotary, that they can use their equipment. So how can we raise some more money to be able to do something? The goal would be to, with that school, supply the rest of the classrooms with the projector screens and laptops. With our current budget, it'd take us a couple years to do that. 2 weeks ago, Chris and I were at Zone Institute in Connecticut. We had these little boards there, and I have asked other districts in Canada and the Northeast to be able to participate. I have several people interested. So I think we'll be able to collaborate on that project. We also toured other schools. We toured a medical clinic, and it is really sad. Another school called Matula School by the airport is more typical of a village school. They have one well, which was built, but the village started using the well, so the kids have no well. So a potential Engineers Without Borders project is building a well. The government has told all the schools in Zambia that you need to have a science lab and science programs. They're not giving them any money to do that, and they're not providing teachers to do that. Matula School, on their own, has started building a laboratory building, but it has 2 layers of bricks around it. Perfect Engineers Without Borders project. The elementary school is sad. We're going to start something actually district-wide. As you know, we have a lot of people in our district who like to travel. We're going to start an international service project probably in the next year, where Rotarians, their spouses and friends would get to go. The first one we're going to do is in Africa, and you'll get to go on safari and have a fun time. But we're going to do a volunteer service project with the Mfue village and actually help refurbish and paint local schools. Any Rotarian person can help paint, and they are really excited about that. We're looking at dates. The last thing is, the government has said you've got to have more medical clinics. So they're building more medical clinics, but they're not giving them equipment or doctors or anything to do it. So we went to a medical clinic. I think that was the day we were walking through those bushes, which was really bushes in the middle of nowhere. And what's happening in the maternal child health area is that women are starting to have, in this region, are starting to have babies at home because there's no separate birthing room. You walk in a clinic and there's one room, so you could be in a hospital next to somebody in malaria and you could be having your baby right there. So Charles said he could get some of the people in the community to help build bricks if we could find a way to get equipment. So we're looking for joint projects with that. The last thing is pretty exciting. As a result of this project, we have a really good relationship with the East Penn School District. There is something called Rotary Community Corps. That is an international project. I've talked to RI about it. They may be interested.
where you don't have to be a Rotary Club and have to pay the dues, but you have a relationship to be able to support something in the community. Right now, there's 2 potential projects.
I have to step out, I'm sorry, I have a class.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Sorry, thank you.
And one is, right now, the Home Economics Department is building, they make these bracelets with Mfue. We're going to have them come here through a visitor at the lodge, and the school kids are going to help sell them. We're also looking at donating soccer equipment. So those are some next steps. Now, just to show you the end here, this is driving home from school in this small little car.
On the road.
It did come north.
The windows didn't work too good.